the LXR-02 can obviously make synth sounds. At its heart, it's a 6-part multitimbral synth with a 6-track sequencer. It's optimised for drums, but it's a digital synth. You probably already know 99% of what you need to start using it as a synth, so the time and brain power entry cost is pretty low. And as a synth, the specs are pretty good. 6-part multitimbral, 2 oscillators per voice, an LFO, multi-mode filter and drive per voice, and 6 parts can be saved as a kit. The controls are very synth-like, so it'll all be quite familiar. You're right at the basic level of waveforms, filters and envelopes, so it's all just like a regular synth. Now you do miss out on some basic synth parameters, most notably sustain, but you do get some abilities that you wouldn't typically find on other small synths, like synced stereo panning, for example. And because the kits load so fast, you could conceivably play a synth intro with a kit and then switch to a regular drum kit for the song. And if you're playing live, that's a very compact and economical way to add voices to your setup. Anyway, that's the logical justification if we needed one. So let's program some sound. So here we are on a blank project, a blank pattern, an initialized kit. One of the first choices you then need to make is which voice are you going to use to create your synth. Well, as you will recall, the first 3 voices share all the same parameters, and then the next 3 are all slightly different to each other, which means the first 3 compared to the next 3 all have their own particular little programming abilities and quirks, which is quite interesting. But I'm a bit of a traditionalist, so I'm going to leave voice 1 for a bass drum if and when we need it, and I'll program the sound on voice 2, which means because voice 3 has exactly the same parameters, later on we can use these 2 as nearly identical sounds and pan them left and right, which can be quite interesting and is much easier to do than perhaps you might suspect. We'll want to make sure we clear out stuff as regards MIDI channels and notes, because I've still got the Keystep 37 attached just off screen, so I'll play that to test some of the sounds as we go, and I'll put the connected keyboard onto channel 1, which means I want to put all this other stuff on some other channel. So let's put everything else on channel 3 for now. Channel 2 is what we'll use. Now, it's only going to play on note C4 at the moment, but we'll have it on any, so the connected keyboard can play it chromatically. 3, 3, 3, 3. So there it is, channel 1, note any, and the others are all safely out of the way. You might also want to make sure you're going out where you think you're going out, but by default that should be fine. So what have we got as a default sound? Something pretty horrible. And I'm playing this on the connected Keystep 37 just out of frame. It's like a low tom sound. So for starters, let's change that to sawtooth. The coarse tuning, 0 is C. And you notice that's got a sort of sick warble to it. We'll get to that in a minute. Now decay and slope, actually we should get to it now. This parameter here for mod, there's 2 mod envelopes. The first one, which is the default one, is pitch mod. So whatever we do, that's not going to sound too great, so we'll just put the amount to 0. So now we've just got a straight pitch. If we press the mod button again, now we go to an assignable modulation. So let's make that, oops, in the destination here, let's make that filter. So this will be our filter envelope, filter frequency. Actually, while we're here, I just might mention a trap here. You see how it says destination FRQ for frequency, and you might think, oh yes, well that's pretty obvious. Yes, but there are other types of frequencies. For example, transient frequency, and that's FRQ as well. And if you're in a channel with FM, that has frequency, so they all display as FRQ. So if you're just selecting here and you see FRQ and you go, oh yeah, that's frequency, that's fine, maybe it won't be. So that's just a little trap. And I mention that so specifically because I got stuck on it for some time and I went, what's wrong with my filter envelope? So I'll pump that up. We're not hearing anything because the filter is so high, so we'll take that down. Now we'll go back to the envelope here. Now slope, as you may recall, it has a total value of 127, which means 63 or 64 is the midpoint, and that is a linear slope. If you go down, then you get that very steep slope, that zappy slope, and if you go up, then you get what amounts to almost like a square shape with a very fast fall off. So it's almost like a gate. So it can be very interesting in that you can match the amount of time that it stays open to whatever BPM you happen to be on, which is quite a bit more control than you get with some synths. But if you want to go to sort of regular synth controls, then 63 will get you this straight linear. Leave it at that for now. Now volume here is whether the connected controller also have volume sensitivity, but I'll have that off for now. So we've got filter frequency there. Now I mentioned there were 2 oscillators per voice, and the second oscillator lives in the FM section. Now at the moment we're not hearing anything because the amount is 0. So again that goes to 127, so that's about 50-50. Get all the usual sort of waveforms. Go for saw, but it's in FM mode. If we take it to mix mode, now we've got 2 saw oscillators. Trouble is that the frequency here is only coarse frequency, so that's fine if you want to create nice little intervals, but if you want something a bit more subtle, you can't get it. So the way to get something subtle is to go back to your main oscillator and adjust the fine tuning there. So now we've got something a bit thicker. on that one. Now something else I might like to check, in case you're getting any sort of weird sounds or noises, it's worth checking what the LFOs on all the voices are. So that's affecting voice 1. Okay, now we are all initialized, so it shouldn't be a problem, but depending on where you are, it can be that an LFO on one of the other voices can be affecting the voice you're working on, which can introduce strange elements into your sound. So it's worth having a check at that. So now we've got a pretty simple, straightforward sound. I mean, we can do little things to it, try different low pass 2 is meant to be a bit acidy, so I quite like the low pass 2 filter. Now drive, it sort of pumps up the volume a bit. We'll leave it off for now. So what else can we do? That's the envelope. Modulation. I mean, we could add in a tiny little initial hit. If you wanted to. There's also the transient, so could add in so little things like that can add to it a bit. Now the LFO, lots of things we can do here. Let's synchronize it. Give it some depth. Give it a waveform. What we have, just leave it on sine. Retrigger from itself, and it will affect voice 2. And the destination for the LFO, fine tune. This is where you can add quite a bit of sort of subtle weirdness if you wanted to. And let's put it on filter frequency just to be classic. How about we change the waveform to random? Maybe. You could also use the LFO as a envelope. Now the only danger with that is if the decay then is too long, you hear the LFO hitting again. But you might be able to use that to your advantage, considering if the LFO is synced, then it might be something that could introduce quite a interesting effect. So, as usual, you'll need to fiddle around with all the parameters until you find something to taste. Now, I mentioned about having synchronized stereo effect. So let's change that back to sine wave, make it even slower. Maybe slower decay, attack. So let's say we like that, but we want to make it a beautiful stereo effect. So we'll pan it all the way. Now we'll go to voice 3, go down to channel 1 because that's what we're on for the other one. We'll make that any. Now the easy way to do this is to be on the voice that you want to replicate. In our case it's voice 2, and when you switch to voice 3 you'll see the differences in that page of parameters. So it's just a matter of matching one to the other. So that was 0, 18 and saw. So we're going to make this 0. Well, that's the fine tune, so actually we'll make it something a bit different, because having slight variations between the two sounds is not a bad thing. So there's that, and there's that one. Next page, that's the envelope, so 4391.15. Again, doesn't have to be exactly the same, probably good if it's a little bit different. So pitch mod modulation to 0, but on the second page, destination frequency amount 102. So destination, filter frequency, amount roughly the same. Now we are onto the FM page. So 63, which is halfway, saw wave and the mix. Now here, to change it around a bit, we can take it down by 12 semitones, so it's an octave down. Now what have we got? Okay, we're getting there. Let's just go to the panning straight away. So negative and positive. That's the transient. I mean, I don't know, we could take anything something, just... Or maybe nothing. Let's just get rid of those transients for now. So low pass 2 with some drive. Let's keep that on low pass. So we'll compare those two filter pages. Well, they're a bit different, but maybe that's not so bad. So that's a pretty thick sound, and why not? Because we've got 4 oscillators now with slight parameter differences, panned left and right. Done anything with the LFO on the other one. See, maybe we could be a bit tricky with the LFOs here and say I have a quarter sync sine wave. We won't re-trigger. It'll affect voice 2, but the destination will be voice panning. So now we go to voice 3, offset. See the range here is 127 still, so again, halfway is about the offset. Destination for LFO 3. Where are we? Voice panning. That's at 1/4. Let's put this at... Actually, let's turn the sync off and put it in free mode. Give it a fair bit of modulation. So now voice 2 and 3 are independently panning, even though they're already panned. So that's not too bad. I mean, there's other things as well, of course. Actually, while we're here, let's just take the drive off. I don't know whether I'd say that's super warm, but it's not bad. Now there are effects we could add from its effects engine, but sadly I think the effects here are pretty bad. It's a terrible thing to say, but I think it's true. So, but if you want effects, you just need to put the output, which is currently stereo 1, change it to effects for both of them. So now they're both going to the effects bus. So we'll go shift effects, have a look. The type. So dry, wet. Well, to be fair, the drive's not too bad. Let's take the panning modulation down a bit. See, where the effects, I think, really fall down is if you want delay. And the delay effects are just shockingly bad. But and the clipping is good, except once it's on, it stays on. So you get this horrible drone the whole time. I mean, surely that doesn't have to be like that. It's just ridiculous. But while you're playing, it's pretty good. If only it didn't drone. So there's one there. Now, let's say we wanted something a bit different. Let's take voice 5. That's on channel 3, so let's make it channel 4. Switch the MIDI controller to 4. Put the note to any. So that's what we've got at the moment. Let's go through and see what the options are. Let's take it up to usual C, or take it off noise, put it onto, well, let's put it on pulse width modulation. Still not getting much. There's the FM page. I think the filter, there it is. Actually, here's something interesting that you can do as well. So you've got repeats and attack. You can put the repeats up and then match it to the attack. Now, there's no synchronization option, but if you programmed it in, you can time it so you can time it that you can start to get interesting things happening. Well, of which that's not one, but anyway, you get the idea. So again, there's interesting controls on here which you wouldn't find on a normal synth, which can start getting you some interesting effects. Now that's incredibly boring, but let's say on the LFO here, synchronize, give it a good amount of modulation. Sine wave is fine. Retrigger on 5. It'll affect voice 5. See, there's another way you could get interesting things happening by having the retrigger. So, for example, you could have basses on 2 and 3 and then have the LFO on volume retriggering from the kick drum, and you could lower the volume or maybe lower the filter based on a retrigger from the kick drum. So you're getting ducking programmed into the sequence, which can be quite interesting, I think. But I digress. What were we doing? Oh yes, destination. Now, because we've got these interesting controls here, let's change that to something else. So there's what we've ended up with there. Then we could layer it with our other sound. Don't forget to save the kit and save the project. Until next time, see ya.